Are we? Okay, it is broadcasting now. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I am Rogerio Pinto here on week, I believe it's 14 or 15 since we started COVID-19, identities and vulnerabilities. We have been doing this for a little while. And today I am not going to talk too much because we have six fabulous guests who will be doing the talking. I will, in a few moments, get out of sight. I'm going to be interviewing them, facilitating a conversation across the panel, but I am not going to be seen. I wanted them to be seen, not me. Um, so this is an event that has been happening for several weeks now, and it's being sponsored by the Faculty Allies for Diversity, which is a committee within the School of Social Work that develops programming and helps us with many issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It has been historically mostly related to the doctoral program, but has in the past many years developed further to include master's level students and to include programming for master's students as well. So a few weeks ago, as we began to develop our conversations here, it became very clear that something very ugly was, heading its head into our environments, white supremacy in a way that we have not seen in a long time, and violence that has been happening all around, but not to the level that we can actually now record and watch those performances taking place on national television over and over again, which are very important in the sense that they review things that otherwise we probably would not even know that they were happening the way they do. But they also re-traumatized a lot of people. And each time that you look at those or even talk about them, it could be a moment of re-traumatization. And it became so important for us to find spaces like this, not only to have discussions about those scenes and the awful situation that we are going through right now, but also to find a place that we can do a little healing and a place that we can actually decide how to move forward, how we can organize our communities to do better. How can we organize our communities to help one another? And how can we organize our communities to understand something that's so old, that keeps coming back, when we think maybe we have resolved some of those things. So this week, there are many new things that happen along the way. Rayshard Brooks gets killed, in Georgia. Absolutely unbelievable the conditions under which that happens. Six people so far, as we know, have been hanged across different places in the country, and supposedly they were committing suicide. I just want us to think about that for a moment, that even if it is true that all those people committed suicide, why did they choose that particular way of committing suicide? I'm not going to answer the question. I just want, to provoke some conversation here, right? We do need to think about that. And then we think about tomorrow, which is the celebration and commemoration of Juneteenth, where it becomes a matter of celebrating, but a matter of celebrating that is a bit funny in some ways, right? We are celebrating something that happened 2 years before that thing actually was announced, right? And so I was reading with my reading group not too long ago the letter that Martin Luther King Jr. wrote from Birmingham jail in 1963. The date he wrote is actually the date of my birthday, the month and the day. And in that letter, he speaks, well, he spoke later, but he writes eloquently about the idea that, that he has been asked, and Black people had been asked over and over again to wait a little longer. This is not the time for us to be doing all this. We need to do things a little more slowly, right? And I keep thinking about what it is we are celebrating tomorrow, which is this thing that abolition happened, and only 2 years later, does a lot of people get to know that this thing, they had been free for 2 years, but it didn't really take, in Texas, and it takes 2 years for this to be announced. And in this historic moment where everybody thinks things may be going too fast, that the demonstrations are going too far, So I just want us to have that as the background of all the things that we're going to talk today. And before I disappear and go away, and leave you guys to talk to each other, and I'll be asking questions, I just want to ask everyone for a moment of silence. And we can think about anybody we want at this point. So many people have lost their lives because of brutality or because of COVID-19. It unfortunately becomes a blur. I want to encourage anyone who'd like, I just thought about this today, to write names of people that you may have lost or people that you cared about on the chat box. We can begin by just, putting names in there. I'm just going to put one name in there, which is the name of the person, the latest casualty of police brutality there, but one can put any name we want. So just a moment of silence, please. Okay, everyone, I'm going to get out of the room. Just my voice will be heard. And I leave you with my 6 guests. Each time that they speak, not each time, the first time that each of them will speak, they will introduce themselves to us, very, very quickly. And I have asked them and I have encouraged them to, whenever they talk about anything, to, if at all possible, to be able to connect that to their own personal experiences and their own vulnerabilities, and also to do that briefly so that we can move to somebody else and we can hear from the same person several times if at all possible. I asked my panel to think about the situation that we are living in since COVID-19 started, and all the brutality that has come up with that, and all the inequality, the health disparities, and all of those things together. And then I asked them, what do they think is different this time, particularly as it relates to the loss of Mr. George Floyd, and the spectacle, the performance that we saw repeating itself over and over again from this man who put his knee on somebody's neck and stayed in there for almost 10 minutes for all of us to see. So we didn't decide who was going to go first. You can speak about anything you'd like, or just reflect on the things that I have just talked about. So since I know Trina very well, and I know she's ready to go, I'm gonna ask her to start us off.
Thank you, Rogerio. Welcome to everybody. My sisters on the panel, I look forward to hearing what each of you have to say. I had 2 seemingly unrelated thoughts, and hopefully to come together at the end. But I've been watching some of the Kimberly Crenshaw podcast, and so this idea of racial violence stemming from the desire to exploit and control Black bodies. So starting with slavery, going to sharecropping, going to Jim Crow, and actually a violent reaction to any time Black people are more well off than white people. So you have Ida B. Wells. Every time there's a lynching, they said sometimes it's because there was an attempt to rape a white woman, but usually there was an economic underpinning when someone had a store that was doing better than a white store, when someone had a business that was too successful and Black people weren't supposed to be doing better than us, and there was a violent uprising. Particularly, people are thinking now about Tulsa, Oklahoma, the same thing. Greenwood was where there was lots of economic prosperity, and for some reason, not for some reason, because of this jealousy that Black people aren't supposed to be doing better than us, there was both a national and local violent response that killed hundreds of people. And then when I think about that in my individual family, I have a great grandfather, so my grandfather's father, who owned land in Alabama, and white farmers nearby just thought they could come take his timber and steal from him because he was a Black man and shouldn't own anything. And he got angry and responded. And he knew there was going to be reprisals, so he ended up killing himself, but making sure his family was safe. And they lost the land and somebody white bought it very, very cheaply. So that's in my own personal family, thinking about this economic exploitation. So when we look at the inequities in income and wealth now, it's not just that we don't know how to start businesses, we don't know how to build wealth, we don't know how to manage our finances, but there's a whole historical climate where when people tried to do something and better themselves or wanted their 40 acres and a mule, there was like usually a violent reprisal, right? And so that's one thing I think about when I think about this, so that when people kind of want to speak up for themselves and to control their own lives and bodies, there's also often a violent backlash. And then the second point that seems unrelated, but hopefully I'll make together, Black women face particular issues within institutions. And so in the context of affirmative action, it's kind of like a twofer. You're kind of a Black woman and you're Black and you're a woman. And experience is more of a double whammy. So you face both sexism and racism. And then sometimes for things in academia, you may get worse course evaluations than your white and male peers. You may get lower pay than your white and male peers. And often we're asked to take on more responsibilities and more stress, but we're looked down upon if we complain about it or try to speak out. And so just one, again, personal example of that, I was part of this kind of training to help people of color to be more active in kind of as a public intellectual and in social media spaces. So I wrote this piece on CNN about being the daughter of a granddaughter of someone who was a house cleaner, and how I was able to get education, do well, but now people who are in kind of low paying jobs, their children are much less likely to be able to get ahead. And so I try not to read the comments in the article because those are usually pretty, difficult, but someone actually individually looked me up at the University of Michigan and emailed me. And I won't even say what he said, but it was like, blankety blank blank, you in, go back to Africa, blah, blah. I mean, it was just horrible. I mean, just ugly, ugly stuff. And so when I first saw it, my first thought, I was angry, of course. I was upset, of course. But I was just going to delete it. Said, oh, well, I'll just forget about this. It's just a mean, hateful person. But, I don't know who I spoke to, but they said, you really ought to report this. So I reported it to the dean, and they reported it to the IT folks. And they actually found this person. He used his own personal email, so he didn't even try to hide. And when they asked him, what are you doing? We're going to try to, keep you from hurting or harassing her. And he knew the law. He said, well, I don't live in Michigan. I don't live within so many feet of where she is. I won't do this again. You can't do anything to me. So apparently he'd been doing this before and thinking about it before. And so just again, first of all, that my impulse was to swallow it and just take it in and just have one more thing to deal with. But then secondly, no real repercussions for that kind of hateful speech and language. And I mean, maybe white colleagues get hateful speech and language, but I doubt at the same vitriol as that email was to me. And the reason I'm putting it together a little bit, when you think about the economic inequality that exists in the African-American community, and you think about the pressures that Black women face, I often also am told by my male friends and colleagues, Black men have it worse. They are more likely to be followed by police. They are more likely to have these issues. And one of the things that Kimberly Crenshaw, she has this thing called Say Her Name, and about all of the Black women who also faced racial violence and hate. And actually, when a Black woman stands up for her rights, it actually triggers a more strong violent reaction by police sometimes than even with others. And so, so for me, thinking about someone in the Black community, I'm devastated and upset when I see a knee on George Floyd's neck, but I'm also, devastated when I think of Breonna Taylor staying in her house in bed, waking up and being shot by police. And then all the other people in that Say Her Name campaign that have, been exploited, been violently killed by police, and just realize that in the Black community, we all can hurt because I have a mother and a father. I have a son and a daughter. I have uncles and aunts. I have nieces and nephews. I have cousins who are male and female. I have people of different gender identities. And so all of that's in my family. And so when there's these things in the Black community, I feel it. And we see these videos over and over and over again. They're so painful. And so rather than finding ways to put fissions and separating us, realizing that hopefully we could find ways to draw together and fight these systems that bring all of us down. So I'll stop there and pass it on to the next person who wants to speak.
Trina, thank you so much for all this. And of course, it leads us to so many things to talk about, and of course, some actions that we may would like to take. So just reminding everyone, this is Trina Schenk. She's a professor of social work in the University of Michigan. She forgot to introduce herself, so I should be doing it anyway. And thank you so much. And someone is asking, Betsy is asking for your article. So if you could place the link of your article in the box so that we can all, have access to that as well. Anyone, should I call on someone to react to Trina's or any thoughts that are happening inside of your head right now that you'd like to respond to? Or someone would just like to raise your hand and you'll be next. Okay, Andrea, and make
Hi.
sure please to introduce yourself.
So, hi, thank you. My name is Andrea Williams. I work at an organization called Rising Ground with a program called Steps to End Family Violence. Much of the work that I did before coming to Steps was prison monitoring and working with formerly incarcerated women on advocacy training and engagement. And it's something that I'm pulling forward in the work at Steps and working with criminalized survivors. So I wanted to, one, thank you, Trina, for the points you put out. They're similar to the things that are in my head in this way. So one of the reasons that I think this moment is after so many killings of Black people at the hands of the police is different is because of the conditions created by the pandemic, which include economic conditions, the ones that you spoke to. And I'm wondering that and thinking that folks were impacted, and there's two things that were kind of, I think, happening. One is the economic impact just kind of across the country on everybody. And that's not equal, but I think that in particular, it had affected white folks in the United States in a particular way. If you're business owners, your wealth, you got hit in a particular way with the shelter in place and the shutdown, and the inability to kind of run businesses if your business wasn't deemed essential. So that's one. And then also, because folks had to stay home, you had to pay attention to the news and you couldn't look away. And I'm wondering that about that person who maybe like in their business would have on the news and would see a police killing. But when you're doing business, you can sort of pay attention to the news or not. But this time there wasn't a way to kind of look away. So there's that. I also think, to your point, Trina, to me, the violent reaction is a violent reaction to the Obama presidency, which I think is what the Trump presidency is all about. And the Republicans that go along with it and basically use Trump for their own agenda, like just all of that. So those are the things that are foremost that I'm thinking about. Right now, I'm doing research on my family history. I live in the town where I was raised. My grandmother was born in this city, Hackensack, New Jersey. And the church that we helped build, I have several family members who are charter founding members of the church. They built the church. And it's celebrating a centennial. And so it's been interesting at this time to work with my cousin and do the research to try to give them information about our family members who are among the families who were founders and get pictures and things. And the way that that has me thinking about, one, it just brings me joy to know roots. It connects me to a moment when Trump was elected, I actually very intentionally focused on my ancestors and how we had to move through this kind of thing. And it's similar now, being able to go through and think about them and their history and what they had to weather. But then also think about that in real terms, like for the Black community in the United States, thinking about the things that have pulled us through these kinds of moments historically. And that connects also to the Juneteenth celebration, facts about it, what it means, and that kind of thing. So those are the 2 points that are just kind of on my mind that connect very much, Trina, with what you were sharing.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you so much for the personal touch as well, right? I mean, I think that whenever we reflect on ourselves, it so helps the communication flow. Yatesha, could you please introduce yourself and then react? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I'm Yatesha Robinson. I am on the field faculty at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. One of the things I like to say is I don't know the answer to question number 1, which is what is making this different? And I've been wondering that a lot. But one thing that comes to mind is the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. And I don't know that we can look at what's happened to George Floyd without coupling it with the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, because I believe that whatever's happened in the reaction across the nation, Ahmaud Arbery's murder set the tone for it. And one of the things I questioned about that is I think that white people and other people saw themselves in Ahmaud Arbery as a person who was running, exercise like so many people in America, and running in a good neighborhood and near his home, doing what he was supposed to do. And they saw with their own eyes this person be run down, harassed, and gunned down in the street. Also, Ahmaud Arbery's photos are very friendly. He looks like a model citizen. And I think that the buy-in came with him, and people were already ripe for change. My daughter, who's a college student, brought to my attention some conservative white women who were speaking out on Ahmaud Arbery's death. And she said, man, if they're waking up, you know, we got somebody's attention, because they usually are not saying things that are legit. So in thinking about George Floyd's, what's happening to him, I believe that Ahmaud Arbery's murder fueled some of this, especially because it happened so quickly right after. And I agree with Andrea about COVID-19. I think that some of the things that we were taking for granted, people have become more aware of. Being at home gives you time to think and ponder. I think some of the liberties that we've taken for granted, we've been pondering that as well. And so there's so many ways that being isolated and quarantined for COVID-19 has affected our psyches. I believe that we can't separate that as well. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, Tisha, thank you so much for, for saying all those things. I wondered if I can get reactions from, Lady Lauren or Marah, of what Tisha just said, but also what I'm going to say, which is, it seems to me that when I looked at each one of those cases, right, and this week we have another one, Rayshard Brooks, who not only is shot twice in the back, but also now we saw a new video showing that he was kicked after he had been on the ground, and that the other officer was also seen in the video on top of him, right? I mean, or stepping on him. So we are talking about the vandalism of the Black body. I don't even know how to express what it is that we are seeing in there. And it seems to me that from one case to the other, there is a spectacle. There's a sense of performance where I think this white police officers are performing to an audience that wants to see a lot of that lynching, and they want to see a lot of that disposing of the Black body. And I don't think that we have seen as many of those sequentially as we have seen in the past few weeks. So there's this, to me, there's this added quality of the performance, where the person is even delaying the performance. So, and delaying in the sense it's not only shooting, but it's stepping on, it's kicking, it's staying on the neck for almost 10 minutes, and so on and so forth. It is the gruesomeness of it that I think is also creating some awareness, or on the one hand, there's an audience that is craving that, and there's an audience that is appalled by it. So what do you guys, do you want to say, you want to go, lady?
And so I don't want to comment on that.
You can comment on anything you want.
Okay, so my name is Lady Carlson, and again, I live in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I've been noticing that I'm the only gray-haired person on this call. So I think I may be the oldest person on the call, which is good. But this is my reflection, and I've been, since I've been in been sheltering in place or whatever, I've been writing a lot. But my grandmother raised me, and I used to say that I was born a sharecropper. Because I learned all the stories about both slavery and sharecropping from my grandmother. Her mother had been born, I think, around 1865, and they were from Trinity, Texas. And I knew the story of Juneteenth because, again, I'm from Port Arthur, Texas, or maybe I didn't say, I'm from Port Arthur, Texas. And my grandmother would always say that they found out, and it was a little confusing. I think what she was telling me was that they found out 2 years after Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation about it. It didn't get to Texas until 2 years later. But once the war ended, the fighting didn't stop in Texas. And so there were battles that continued to go on, and battles that, quite frankly, some of the Confederacy won, again, even after the war ended. Port Arthur is about 45 miles from Galveston, Texas, where the news first was broke about Juneteenth. And my grandmother told me this, that I was born in 1951. My grandmother said that when she was a young girl growing up, a young woman, Blacks celebrated Juneteenth, and they do the watermelon and the red soda water. And she said, but then around the 50s and the 60s, Blacks didn't want to be associated with their slave past anymore. And so they stopped celebrating Juneteenth. But I was always taught that Juneteenth, July 4th is not our holiday. This is my grandmother. July 4th is not our holiday, it's theirs. Juneteenth is ours, because that's when, again. And so I guess for me, look, I'll be 69 in July. For me, quite frankly, it is that I hope I don't cry, I don't want to cry, that Juneteenth has gone from being a Texas holiday that people stopped celebrating to now talking about being a national holiday. And so to my grandmother, I just say thank you, because when I was growing up, I was like, why is she telling me this? I'm a child. And then now I understand why. And so that would be my reflection.
Thank you, lady. Does anyone want to reflect on that? I mean, the meaning of this holiday to you? Do you want to say something, Marah, about the holiday itself?
So thank you all. It's been lovely to hear. I have a couple thoughts. Really very much in line with how Trina started. What this time period has caused me to do is to think and read deeply and to relearn some things I thought I knew well. So for me, the meta conversation is about the structure of this nation, right? So it is structured on a deeply anti-Black white supremacist ideology. That's how we were created, right? And so for me, that's the meta-organization for how we moved through Reconstruction till the most recent murders, the extra-legal murders of Black people and the legally televised murders of Black people, the spectacle of it. I will say personally, I saw my first picture of a lynching when I was 10. So I understood what some folks seem to be coming to consciousness now, then. And when I looked at that picture, I looked at the two hanging bodies of Black folks, and I understood that was meant to be me. I made quick work of that. But then I looked around at the white folks, and they were celebrating. It was a party. It was a collective shared racial bonding for the use, misuse, and abuse of the Black body. At 10, I understood this in my guts, and I understood, okay, I see how this thing is structured. It's a structure larger than family. It's a structure larger than our individual stories. I also understood that my white mom and my white family would not undo this. So the bonds of motherhood, family, love, none of that takes care of this larger overarching thing. Maybe this will sound like a non sequitur, but hang with me. I have been reading this book by Bellou, and she's looking at the white power movement and the evolution since since Vietnam, and how yesterday's Klan is one thing, and it was supporting a white supremacist system and infiltrated all the different governments, particularly after Reconstruction, okay? But then folks went off to Vietnam, got military training, came back, and that ideology morphed into an anti-government ideology, right? And so there's a bedfellow amongst the white supremacist group, and they've all come together. Bellou tracks this. And so how I have felt since this all happened was like, a little bit like I'm losing my mind, because everybody I talk to, I'm like, have you read this book? Are you watching this? Are you seeing these forces coming together? So I have deep concern about that. I have deep concern about the militarized, violent movement. And my biggest concern has been the idea that folks who are racialized white won't see it when it's coming because they're not conditioned to. You understand? I live in a rather homogenous state, so I always am aware of what's going on so that I can get from point A to point B. And it's like, in good times, I don't get bad service. In bad times, I'm not caught out there. So I actually think we are living in incredibly important and serious times. And I think the forces of anti-change are armed and ready. I don't have time for news reports that go on and on about the fact that we don't react to white militia guys at the state house and blah, blah. Okay, there's no more time for that kind of conversation because people are being murdered in ways that are beyond spectacle. So maybe I sound like I'm going off the deep end, but I don't think I am. I think I am seeing what is occurring. And it makes sense in the logic of a system that never meant for Black people to be a part of it. It was never constructed for that. And that's not taking away any gains. I'm not doing that, but I'm talking about as a system. To be racialized Black is to tell you something about who has access to what goods and who has access to even walk down a street unmolested. That's what it means. It's not where your grandma comes from. It's not what you had for dinner. It's a racial caste system with the military capacity of the police state. These are serious things, folks. And I think this is our last best chance to do something about it. So that's what I've been feeling. And then having conversations with my son about what's happening so that he doesn't internalize it. So then I have to take him through our entire history so that when he asked me, why did the police do that? I had to talk to him about racial terror. I couldn't say anything else because his presumption was that the system would keep him safe. It's not built to do that. Are we going to build it differently? I hope so. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Well, we are going to come back to you at least one more time. So this is Marah Curtis from Madison, University of Wisconsin at Madison, professor of social work as well. You guys are forgetting to say who you are. So I'll keep, tracing back. Anyway, Marah, thank you so much. I mean, again, those things feel very personal to all of you. And clearly people have different histories. So I hear you talking about what one might call, women specific concern, like you have a child that you'd like to protect. I have heard that many times from men as well. We had a guest last week whose, major concern he has nowadays is his two younger Black sons. He's not so concerned about him, but he's very concerned about his sons. So I begin to hear that, and I'm acutely aware after hearing you about the counter I forgot exactly how you called it, but like, you know, like those who are against the changes that we are trying to achieve, right? To create some equality for Black folk, they are ready to do anything they can to stop any movement in the right direction. So I'm going to go to Lauren to give her the opportunity to react to everything that we have, you know, we have been talking about, or to bring up anything else that might be a very specific concern of yours.
Thank you, Rogerio, and having this group of people together, there's a lot to process. And my name's Lauren Davis, and I work at the School of Social Work in our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I think just in reflecting with where we're at, you know, one of the things that Trina mentioned was just sort of the role of women, I think, one, in our institutions and also in a lot of our movements that we have. Women, Black women especially, have been at the backbone of moving things forward, and the violence that goes against our bodies, and both in these movements and in the places where we work, where we live. And so I think for myself, even just thinking about working in the DEI space, I also think about how that parallels where often when I look around, the people who are doing that work are mostly women of color who are carrying that load, carrying that burden, when we are already taking on extra because we want to support the few people who are in our systems, in our institutions. And so then we're taking on more that's often not recognized, not given credit for. We're complaining if we mention that, and others are not stepping up and saying, let me take the burden off. What can I do? And I think in these times, you know, I've had a lot of people calling, asking, what can I do? And they want to take action, and I appreciate that. And also, I recognize that like everything that's happening is traumatic, and to continue to watch these videos is traumatic. And for me to educate you, that is labor and time that I may not have the energy to do. And so I think something that has been really important for me is to really think about, how do I take care of myself? How do I and others, and like make sure that we are in a space where if I have to say, no, I'm not going to do this thing for work today because I have to rest, you know. Audre Lorde talks about self-care as like an act of political warfare. Like, I think that is important because like we are in violent times, and we have to create those spaces where we continue to nourish ourselves, because I've watched so many of our leaders perish. And some of this is not just the violence that's being perpetrated against us, but then it's like taking its toll on our bodies. And so I think all of that lives within us. And I'd like for myself have to grapple with like how I've embedded these messages, and I have to produce, I have to continue to support my community, I have to be out in the streets, I have to like support my family. It's like all of these things at once, and it's like, it is a lot to take on. And so how do you do that and also know when it's time to say, I cannot right now. I've done all I can do for today.
Lauren, this is incredible. And thank you for bringing that up, because, you know, it is so, I mean, especially among social workers, right, or the majority social workers, to think of action. Although many of social work actions are completely inane, they don't do very much. I still think that as a profession, we are so concerned about, you know, what's going on inside of somebody's head. And we have been so focused on helping people inside of their heads, and we have really neglected many of the things that social workers were supposed to be doing for the past 100 years. And I hope that, you know, we'll bring this conversation as we keep moving forward, the responsibility as a professional. But I would like to just remind everyone, if you don't know, so last Sunday, many of our students made a decision to go to the DIAG, you know, from 12 to 8. And they basically sent an email to all of us, and they explained, we have been protesting and demonstrating for many weeks now, and now we protest as we rest. And that's what they proposed to do on Sunday. They took, you know, sleeping bags to the DIAG, and some of them took naps. You know, I was there at the very beginning. So I'm very happy that they did so. I mean, our students, particularly, you know, Black women who our students, are leading us in this incredible movement of action, but also teaching us that we need to stop. Because if we don't, then there is no time for reflection, which is what we are doing now, right? I mean, I think we need this moment of reflection. And as we reflect, I'm going to go back to Trina to ask you to react to what Lauren said, which you started off anyway. Like when I hear Lauren, I begin to imagine like this weight that is falling, on Black women to hold the family together. I can't do what Lauren just did, right? But I would love for this panel to talk a little more about that and what can be done to what can be done about all those responsibilities that I hear from Lauren, and what can be done structurally, right? Not one person at a time. What can be done structurally to lessen that load that is falling on the same people over and over again, including the load of having to teach the oppressor how not to oppress. I mean, that's basically what I'm hearing here. So if we can take the rest of this meeting, this event, to talk about that, I think it would be incredible. So I'll give me your thoughts, Trina.
This is a tough issue. The one thing that I keep coming back to is just pick your battles. So if I'm assigned to teach a class, I'm going to make sure I take care of the kids or the students in that class. I mean, my family, so on the weekends, I try not to look at emails at all and just spend time with my family. That's a choice I make, but everybody picks their own battles. So I also am engaged in some national conversations because like Marah, I try to be in the policy world as well. And so there's lots of people in DC figuring out, how can we make sure small Black businesses aren't lost in this whole CARES Act or whatever is being passed at the federal level. There's state level advocacy. So I'm doing some advocacy work, I'm taking care of my family, and I'm taking care of the students that are my responsibility. And I personally haven't done a lot of the protests directly, even though I've tried to support the students who are. But not that I don't think it's important, it's just that I can't do it all. So that's kind of the way I've made decisions. But I think everyone has to pick their own battles. One, what their best skill sets are and what their responsibilities are, and then not feel guilty about not being able to do it all and not allow others to make you feel guilty.
Yeah, I could say a lot here, but I'm not. I'm going to let Andrea say, because I feel like then, I feel that I'm not doing enough. I'm not going to the protests. And I teach advocacy in protest. And I feel like if the body is not showing up, what I can do behind the computer is it doesn't feel to me, but I totally hear what Trina is saying. We have different skills and we have to be doing different things, right? I just feel this impulse that if I could, and I'm getting, a little old for, to go to some protest that might be a little dangerous. But, anyway, Andrea, give us your reaction.
So one of the things that I think is different about this moment than any other moment is the digital age. And we see, at least in my neck of the woods, but I think all over, that we see decentralized leadership on the ground where people are organizing. Like Black Lives Matter movement is decentralized, not reliant on kind of one leader that people kind of rally behind and get behind. And it can be a lot. But I feel like the analysis, for example, that Marah put forward is thinking and analysis that's out there on the ground, and there are organizers who think about and try to act on that question in their demands, right? As a way of trying to really get at dismantling, get to the roots, right, of the system. And so I think that's very important work. And we need to kind of pay attention to and take care of the folks and join in, right, that work. Because I think it's joining in that work that's gonna move us to trying to dismantle. And I agree with you, Marah, that I thought you put it beautifully. that we are underestimating. Like if we just kind of look at what mainstream media puts forward, we're underestimating what we're up against. We need to read between the lines. And that's why, for me, I go back to my ancestors. The question on the table, for example, I keep asking the question because I don't know, why did the relatives that founded the church along with other families, why did they migrate from Virginia to New Jersey? I don't think they were fleeing. That's not a story, fleeing per se, like some people in the South did. They were fleeing a very specific terror. But I'm gonna study the times and find out what was happening in Richmond, right? Because what you described, Marah, is a continuum. This is not, it has unique points about this moment, but it's a continuum if you look at the history. If you know the history, look, this is what happens to us continually. And you look at the sister who, she's one of the Black Lives Movement leaders, and her video has gone viral where she's talking about the police violence and why people are reacting with, quote, looting. And she gets very emotional about it. And she talks about how she was taught this point as an organizer, because anytime, and Trina, you pointed to this, anytime within the system, we followed the rules of the system and we built and we succeeded, we got killed or burnt, or, right? So the thing that I think seems significant is the decentralized efforts, because when you look at the decentralized efforts, they make the connections even internationally, just like happened in the 60s with the Civil Rights Movement. They connected the dots globally with what's happening. And it's a lot that's happening, but I think it challenges us to try to see things through a different frame as a way to try to create the world that we really want, to dismantle a deeply embedded system, to dismantle the institutions that prop up that system, at the same time building new, right? So that if you can defund the police, what are you gonna replace it with, right? Those kinds of things. So it is a lot to think about and contemplate, but I appreciate the work that people are doing that we can join in on. In a way, it makes us really think about how we gonna do this? How are we gonna do this?
Lady, can you reflect on that as an organizer? The idea that, you know, what we may be seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. That there are many things that are not visible through, you know, your commercial media, but there are people who are prepared for destruction, meaning white supremacists. It may be a lot more than what we actually have been seeing.
I'll tell you what's encouraging to me, and again, I'm almost 70 years old. What's been encouraging is I think Blacks have always understood the struggle. What's been encouraging is that there are young whites that are protesting. So it's not just Blacks anymore. And you know, Dr. King had people, whites that protested, but not a lot, you know, in that letter from Birmingham. And so that to me is encouraging. And then our organization in Louisiana is doing tomorrow, as a matter of fact, a gathering of clergy, and we're launching what we're calling 10,000 conversations across the state, where we really are pairing up white churches and Black churches, and not to, you know, because I think we all do those kind of kumbaya moments. I'm okay, you're okay, I like you, you like me. This is really to have both hard conversations about race, but I don't know, I know that if you think that Louisiana is kind of like, you know, we're late to the party, and so now we're getting this move to develop Washington-style politics in Louisiana. We have a very, very conservative legislature, everything they've done has been for the business community. And so this is to say, number one, we're reimagining Louisiana. We're not going back. And how do we have those hard conversations so that we can start really enacting policy change?
Can I say something? Oh, sorry.
Yes,
No,
absolutely. And I just want to, say that I love, how specifically you spoke of Louisiana, because I do think that white supremacy looks different. It is manifested differently in different cities, in different states. And I think we need to be smart not to get confused, right? That we think that this thing looks the same everywhere we go, because it doesn't. And I think that we, so thank you for making that local, because we need to think about these things very locally. So yeah, Tisha, go ahead, and then we'll go to Laurie.
Thank you. So I agree with Lady that this needs to be a combined effort. In my opinion, there are going to be some things that need to be done by Black people and led by Black people. And I think namely, it needs to be about rebuilding the Black family. You can't look at supporting the Black woman separate from her place in the Black family. And Black women are leading Black families in a lot of contexts. And we need Black men alongside us in that effort. So the Black family has been destroyed, shut down, and broken in many ways by many systems that are designed to break families. So that is a charge that really needs to be a Black movement, done by Black people, designed by Black people, conversations like really figuring out how to solve that. However, these larger, more macro issues, we have to be combined with all conscious people. And I believe that there's always been the battle between the conscious and the unconscious. And the battle between this battle has always been full of diverse people from all cultural backgrounds who are awake, and they are fighting injustice. Even when that fight doesn't personally benefit them, they fight that injustice because they're led to, through their consciousness, their humanity, lead them to act. And so those are the people from all backgrounds that is necessary to have unity and to fight this, because the white supremacists, they're too numerous to try to do this with any one race. We have to combine everybody, the people who are conscious, who are fighting against hate. Last thing I want to say about that, I know we're talking about anti-Blackness here, and that is I love that Rogerio, and bow down that he is naming that this is very unique. However, we have to have the attitude as a country that, and as a field of social work, that we're not going to tolerate injustice, and that injustice is shameful, and you're going to be called out in a bad way if you are going to do that. And that is not just anti-Blackness, but that's a lot of different things. But once we get into the energy of fighting injustice and naming that anti-Blackness has been a unique place in that, I think we can make some progress.
Thank you, Yatesha. Yeah, I mean, it's a very simple thing, right? I mean, if we start mixing too many things every time we have in a conversation, all the very important things become diluted. And I think that has been a strategy to dilute, very specific experiences. And so that's why, one needs to concentrate. I'm going to go to Laurie, and then we are going to end with Marah.
Okay, I'll go quickly. And Yatesha, I think you just sort of picked my brain and said a lot of the things that I was thinking. And I think, especially Lady, as you were talking about, like having those difficult conversations, I think that's the thing that I hope at the very minimum sustains through like what's happening right now, because I think all of this attention will eventually die down. And so like you want movement to continue to happen. And I feel like people don't necessarily know the role that they have in like changing policy, but at a very minimum level, I think you have an obligation to continue to have these difficult conversations with the people that you're in community with, and starting to ask those really difficult questions and getting to the root of like how people are thinking about things and challenging them, and to Andrea, who you've talked a lot about history and knowing your history. And I think it's also really tough because we're in a country where our history is false. Like what we've been taught is false. And so a lot of people don't know the true history of our country and how race was constructed. And so how do you dismantle a system that you don't even fully have an understanding of? So it's really a lot of unlearning, relearning new things, and then trying to move forward, because I think people are in a place where they want to act, but haven't necessarily done that internal work to be in a place where they're actually going to be of service in the movement.
One thing is for sure, Lauren, the history of Black people in the United States, that history has been so, has been made so invisible. And I think the only way that we can actually make sure that that history is clear is by doing the kinds of things that Andrea has been talking about. It's almost like families need to know those histories and pass them on to generations, because the effort here was not to highlight those histories, was to erase those histories in so many ways. So Marah, I'm going to go to you for your reaction, and then we'll have a few final words, and then our hour will be, oh my God, I could do this for 5 hours. Go ahead, Marah.
So,
yeah.
So structurally, this is what I think. Yeah, I really appreciate everybody's comments. The thing about history is really, really deeply important. So if you take the framework of the construction of this country, this white supremacist ideology, and you could look at source documents, right? It was constructed that way. And so the history that we are taught that systematically excludes truth is really important. So that's a K through 12 thing. So there are going to be cohort differences here. So everybody who is 35 and older or 25 and older, it's going to be a different strategy for folks coming to consciousness around actual real American history. But however, young people who are learning now, because education is so local, I mean, teaching tolerance, all of that, I mean, we have to have accurate American history. That would be huge, because young people who are coming up now, they won't be burdened in the way that those of us who are older are, because they would have accurate history. Even though I know a lot of history, I've learned a lot of late. I listened to a little thing on NPR Here and Now with Professor Doherty, right? Do you know him? I can't remember what university he's at, public policy and economics. Anyway, he was talking about these race murders, these white mob race murders from 1867 through 1920. People know Rosewood, people know Tulsa, but there were 30 of them. I hadn't known that. I teach history. I was like, 30? Wow. And they were all over, and they were for slightly different reason, but the overarching thing that captures them all, part of it's the resentment piece, but part of it is the white racial anger of a sort of vitriolic sort that leads you to do things like lynch and burn and take body parts. We can't back away from that. It doesn't mean individual white folks hold that, blah, 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 but that has to be unpacked. And if we don't want to be that, we have to look at it and we have to teach it, because I tell you, young people, I teach undergrads, they are an open-hearted lot. It won't be so much work going forward because they won't be socialized the way that, I'll speak for my own age group, I'm 51. It's a different sort of an exercise. And Lauren, you need not educate everybody. They can get a link, get accurate American history. Get accurate American history. I can tell you where my family was, like you're doing, Andrea, where my great-grandfather was born, and I can understand because I can lay history over my thing. But people racialized white should understand that too. Did you get 160, did you get 140 acres with the Homestead Act? Awesome for you. You got to generate that. We didn't get a 40 acre and a mule. What does that mean? You know, these things are important, and you don't have to do that work because it's history, and everyone should know that. Sorry, there it is. History, that's and supporting the activists, how they need to be supported. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marah. Well, thank you, all of you. What a fabulous panel. Thank you, Lauren Davis, Lady Carlson, Yatesha Robinson, Trina Shanks, Andrea Williams, Marah Curtis, for your incredible experiences, and for giving us so much to think about. I'll be coming back next week with a different panel of beautiful people. It will be a more diverse in terms of gender, because we have been talking so much in the past many weeks about police brutality, and white supremacy, and many things that I feel are never talked about enough in relationship to our profession. You know, Andrea is a lawyer, and there are many people who are attending this who are not necessarily social workers. You know, I don't know if lady identifies herself as a social worker or not. Um, but the point is, we have a lot of work to do within social work. We need to understand our role in white supremacy. Where is white supremacy in social work? Where do we contribute? And I am very, very concerned, petrified, horrified of the idea of social work becoming connected to the police, and social work now working to do the things the police have done for so long. I am very concerned about that. And then next week, that's what we are going to talk about. We need to look into social work to find out what is our relationship to all these things that we are talking about, and our connection now with police. Will it do anything better, or is it going to make it even worse? I think that it's time for us to really look inside of our profession and understand much more broadly our contributions to white supremacy, how we teach our students, how we do each and every one of those things. So I invite all of you to come next week, my guests included, of course, and all of the participants. We are going to be talking about social work and white supremacy and all the things that come with it. So my love to each one of my panelists. Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who joined us, and have a beautiful, beautiful weekend. Bye-bye.